At issue are 10 provisional ballots that have addresses that can't be verified. A judge ruled Monday those votes should remain uncounted, but that is unlikely to be the last word. Chula Vista Councilman John McCann holds the disputed post after defeating former Mayor Steve Padilla by 2 votes. Attorney Bob Ottley represented former San Diego Mayor Dick Murphy in the 2004 recount involving former Councilwoman Donna Fry. He joins me now. Bob, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on.
On what basis did Judge Eddie Sturgeon find it was okay for the registrar not to count those 10 provisional votes that were turned in by Chula Vista voters?
Well, a provisional vote is a ballot that's cast by somebody who's voting not at their polling place. So they've gone to the wrong place to begin with. But we do everything we can to let people vote in California. So they cast a ballot, they put it in an envelope. The envelope's sealed, and then they put the information on the envelope from which the registrar can determine whether or not it should be counted. And only then is the ballot taken out. About 5% of all votes in that race were provisional ballots. 95% of those were counted. But the ones that were at issue were individuals who, on the envelope, when requested to list their current residential address, which would have allowed the registrar to verify that they're still registered where they're supposed to be. They put a P.O. box, they put a non-existent residential address, or they put a business address. So based on that, the registrar assumed they must have left their original address, and now since they're giving an address that cannot be verified as a voting address, which a business cannot be, a P.O. box cannot be, he ruled that those provisional ballots, 10 of them, should not be opened at all.
But the attorney in this case, the challenger, John Moot, who represents the Chula Vista voters, said, look, the signatures on those ballots matched the signatures on file with the registrar. Why doesn't that matter?
Well, maybe it will when it gets to the Court of Appeal, but for this judge, the judge determined that it was a reasonable method undertaken by the registrar to verify that these were eligible voters. He put the question down. He didn't have to put the question down, where are you currently registered to vote? But he did. And when they put in a P.O. box, the registrar assumed that person had moved. But to allow them to vote, they have to have moved to a valid address within Chula Vista. A P.O. box is not. And the judge determined that that was not an abuse of discretion. The key thing here is that when you're challenging an agency like the registrar, you have to find that when they exercise their discretion, it was an abuse of discretion, and you have to find that by clear and convincing evidence, because we don't want to be second-guessing everything our city or elected officials do. So the judge had to defer to his discretion, found that it was reasonable.
But what's the basis? What's the precedent for the judge's ruling?
Well, it's interesting because on the merits of the case, and there were really 2 rulings. Let me take you back one step. The judge initially ruled that because only 15 ballots were challenged and not all 27 that came within this same category, there were 27 total provisional ballots that had this issue. The elector had only challenged 15 of those. So the initial ruling of the judge was that even if I was to rule for you, I'd be counting these votes but not these other 12 that weren't challenged, and that would create an equal protection issue. So number 1, he threw out the challenge on those grounds. But when he got to the merits, he determined, not particularly on any given precedent, he just determined that the method chosen by this registrar to verify provisional ballots was reasonable. If we were in Orange County, the Orange County register would have counted those ballots. But we're not in Orange County, we're in Chula Vista, we have this registrar, and the courts have to defer to the public agency, in this case determined that it was a reasonable basis for verifying that these people were registered voters.
But how fair is this ruling to voters who clearly intended to vote for one candidate or the other?
Well, it's not an issue of whether they clearly intended to vote for one candidate or the other. The question is whether they clearly were entitled to vote. And that's the whole purpose of this, because if we don't have strict rules relating to who gets to vote, then we're going to have people voting that shouldn't vote for any one of a number of reasons. And so I think this is very fair, because you have to have accountability in the system, and you have to have a system that guarantees that it's an accurate vote. And I think the registrar probably was reasonable in doing what he did.
Very quickly now, the attorney, John Moot, plans to appeal this ruling. What are his chances?
Well, I talked to John yesterday. He said he would be filing an appeal. the appeal would in all likelihood be expedited, so this matter could be resolved in a matter of a few months. I think it's going to be really tough, and I think the tougher argument is the initial ruling made by the judge, which is you didn't challenge all of the people similarly situated. And I think that decision was made before Mr. Moot got involved, but it's too late to add those now.
We've got to wrap it there. Bob Ottley, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.